We're live. So good day, everyone, and welcome to the ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum. My name is Paul Adepoju, and I'm really excited considering the uniqueness of the topic of discussion today. And the reason is because what we are trying to kickstart today and what we are introducing today is a journey, is a lifelong journey for many journalists that desires a unique approach, an entirely different line of action, line of career that is different from what many individuals are used to. When you talk about journalism, conventional journalism, the way it's expected to be practiced, a journalist is expected to be working for a media organization. And that's by the journalist byline will be under that particular media organization. But things are already changing, and this is due to the advent of freelance journalism. With freelance journalism, you have the capability as an expert to work for multiple media organizations, covering different beats, and there is no single rule, single approach towards practicing freelance journalism. And that is why we believe that this webinar is going to be a great opportunity for individuals that are already practicing freelance journalism and those that are interested in starting their own freelance journalism career. Whatever stage you are at your freelance journalism career, I believe this is a webinar that is going to be go a long way in directing your line of action. And we are reaching you across different platforms. If you are joining us on Zoom today, please don't hesitate to put in your personal and direct questions regarding this topic of discussion in the Q&A chat button. And if you are joining us on the Facebook Live, please put your questions in the comment section below this live stream. Without much ado, I would like to introduce our expert today. And she's a professional freelance journalist, and her works have been published by different top-rated media platforms. I'm talking about Melissa Noel. Melissa, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you join us today, and our audience are also excited to learn from you. So without wasting much time, I'd like to know whether you're ready, and maybe we should start with your presentation before we go into the Q&A session. Can we do that?
Yeah, I'm ready. I just wanted to talk a little bit before I get into the presentation, just give a little background on myself and how I actually got into freelance reporting. I started my career in network television news at ABC News in New York City. And after about two and a half years, while I was working on my master's degree, I decided that I really wanted to tell stories and see more stories reported on the Caribbean region. I am a first generation Caribbean American, and the stories that I knew that I wanted to see reflected more of in the coverage. And I thought, instead of complaining about not seeing it, I should be the person who can add to those stories and pitch those stories to the outlets and the newsrooms that I had worked for. So I became a freelance reporter it's been almost 7 years now since I made that switch. And that was a big deal for me because I was going from, a salary and benefits and all that good stuff to pretty much the unknown. And even though I had gone on and gotten a master's in journalism, I didn't really know the business ins and outs of freelance reporting. And so I had to really learn how to make it work for myself, one, and then how to make it profitable to be able to not only survive, but thrive in the industry and then expand upon what I was doing. So I took a route that, some people thought was crazy for me to kind of leave that, to leave a role in that regard. But for me, I wanted to not only just tell stories, but tell ones that I was passionate about, tell some underreported stories in a region that I know well, have lived in, and really wanted to see more of in the American media. So that's kind of a little bit about my story. And I am going to just kind of get into my presentation now to tell you how I did it, how I got started. And there's definitely no, one size fits all, but this is what worked for me.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the introduction. And while you get your while you set up your slides, I just want to inform those that are still just joining us that you have the opportunity to ask any question that you might have regarding this subject. Just use the Zoom chat button, the Q&A button, if you are joining us on Zoom, or you put your question right on the Facebook live stream. And so. Melissa, we are ready for the slides.
Perfect. So I'm gonna share my screen right now. Can you see that okay?
Yes, it's okay. It's
Okay,
looking good.
perfect. So for me, when getting started as a freelancer, the biggest question was, what is my why? And in everything I do, I wanted to think about what that why was. And for me, as I mentioned, it was really getting to push more stories from the Caribbean region, as well as throughout the Caribbean diaspora in the US and Canada, to mainstream US outlets. And I wanted to see more coverage done beyond, hurricanes and natural disasters. So what I did was really identify, but also then push the coverage beats that I had. So I was known for a lot of race and culture reporting. That's a lot of the work that I did in some of the units that I worked for, both at ABC and NBC News as the second outlet that I went to. And so I worked for some of the verticals there, NBC Black, NBC Latino, what have you. And so I was already had a portfolio of work in race and culture and business reporting from that standpoint, plus production skills. So everywhere I pitched and all the things that I did, I made sure that I was focused on things that I was already known for, and then the beat that I was trying to build, which was the Caribbean beat for myself. And then I looked at what are the other lines of business that I could create for myself outside of my day-to-day reporting, because I had to balance and figure out how I was going to make money. So with that came journalism training and teaching. When I decided to become a freelancer, what I did was after I got my master's degree, I went back and I taught journalism to undergraduate students. And then maybe 2 years, maybe about a year and a half, 2 years after I earned my master's degree, I was also teaching first semester master's level students computer assisted reporting, as well as undergraduate students, like their journalism basic classes. And what that allowed me to do was know that I was going to have a steady income coming in from teaching, something that I could depend on, every 2 weeks, or what have you, to be able to get that done. I did the same thing with some of the other skills that I had developed as a producer, which was I knew how to book guests for different shows. So if there was freelance booking producers needed for different shows, I was able to take on those roles. And then consulting, I've lived and worked in the Caribbean region. So consulting in the travel industry, consulting when it came to diversifying not only content, but also what is put out there from the travel perspective. I utilized those skills that I already had to give myself the room to be able to obtain some other roles and freelance, both in journalism and outside of journalism, but stuff that was more so journalism adjacent, and allowed me to still utilize those skills and make money at the same time, because it was definitely a hustle and a juggle for me to make it work. So I was teaching, contributing to 2 outlets, and then also doing some media consulting. And that helped me as I figured it out, because I really was figuring this out as I went along. So thinking of yourself as a business, this was a piece of advice that I was given, but I really did not know what that meant when I first started freelancing. And what I learned along the way is that you have to work smarter. You have to work smart. So you have to sit down and think about what you want to earn, how you want to do it, what are the goals you want to meet, and not just, okay, I just want to get this byline really quickly, because it was really easy for me to get the bylines, but not necessarily the payments when I was starting out. And that, of course, caused a lot of issues for me, because you're trying to make this scalable, you're trying to make sure you make money. So I had to make it make sense. So what I said, okay, was I had to think about myself as a business. So what would be my startup cost? I thought about what was going to be needed for me equipment wise. I worked for my first 2 years as a freelancer. I did a lot of video reporting for different outlets, both based in the Caribbean and here. I'm based in the New York City area. I'm in New Jersey. So I was working as a one-man band. So I was, shooting, editing, producing, what have you. And so I had to get my camera, my microphones, my light kit, that kind of thing. That was a couple of $1,000s. I also had to think about what tools that I want to use to streamline my reporting process. So I use an app called Otter to so if I have if audio or video file, I will put it into Otter, and it will take a couple of minutes and give me back a fully it'll give me back my transcript, so that I'm not just sitting there, transcribing, and I'm saving time. So audio transcription, video, that kind of thing. Then when it came to knowing, okay, I need to purchase my domain, have my portfolio there online, because that's how I get a lot of business hits and information from people. And then to grow my following. And then I also came up with the idea of, once I was told, okay, you have to think of yourself as a business. And that was the advice I kept getting from my mentors. It was, okay, what are going to be my plans to scale my earnings over time? And how am I going to do that? Like, what is it going to take for me to make the amount of money that's comfortable for me? And I know that that's different for everyone, but what is it going to take for me to be able to earn what it is I need to be comfortable, or at least break even when the month comes, and then figure out how to scale that over time. So I had to think about how I was going to pitch to make it make sense for me. So what I started to do was a couple of things, and I'm going to kind of work backwards on this list. So I came up with a calendar, and on that calendar, and this is something I still do to this day, I put down major anniversaries. If we're coming up to, if there's political elections, either here or in the Caribbean region, I have those on a calendar. If important bills are going to be passed at a certain time. If I'm looking at a local story with international implications, or something that might have the ability to kind of work for two different outlets in the different countries that I work in, I always try to anticipate those needs, and that calendar helps me do that. So I use my Google Calendar, I put things on there, and then what I do is I think about when I can pitch that story, as well as an anticipated publish date, because I know that the outlets that I'm looking to pitch are going to want to do stories around those topics, and I can position myself to not only pitch, but get that story commissioned and be able to plan it out without kind of just rushing to get it, get things done, get things approved quickly, and try to figure it out. And then I'm always, every single place that I've worked for, I've really taken the time to know what their pitching guidelines and style are. So I know for certain places, if I'm pitching, I need to have my photo plan attached, and even whether or not I'm going to be the person taking the photos, they want to know that you have that in mind. For other places, I know it's just a quick 200-word pitch, and then for others, I know it needs to be a little bit more detailed, and I need to be able to provide information on whether I have things like flights, accommodations, and what have you taken care of, or if I'm going to need to also include in there that those things, I'm seeking those things to be covered by the outlet. And in addition to my calendar, about maybe once a month, what I do is I sit down and just kind of update my contact list. I subscribe to things like TV Newser, or some other outlets that'll tell you like who's moving where, so that when editors are moving around, or producers are moving around, I know who's gone where, and or even on LinkedIn, so that I know who's there now and I can pitch to them. So that the calendar has really been helpful for me, because anticipating some of those needs ahead of time has helped me to land a lot of feature pieces. I do a lot of feature writing, and those features tend to pay more than some of the, your quick turnaround 400, 500-word piece. And that has helped me to say, okay, I can anticipate that I'm going to get X amount next month because I'm doing these 2,000 word feature pieces. So that has worked for me. And then I use other things. So like LinkedIn Pro Finder has been really, really great for me. And you can break it down or put your expertise as whether it's copywriting or it's production or it's video. And LinkedIn Pro Finder will send me that a client is looking for someone to write stories on X or Y or needs video content at, at X time. Contently is another one that I've used in the past where you can, people pitch the stories to you. And then there are some other ones that are specifically for journalists looking to pitch their work. You just have to create your profile. The name of the other one I'm trying to think of right now is escaping me, but I'll think about it. And that one, this particular one, they work directly with newsrooms. And if your profile is on there and something matches, they'll shoot you an email and say, hey, this editor or this outlet is looking for someone. It's either a flat fee of, let's say, $600 or the fee is negotiable. Put in your application for it. Just put in your pitch for it and let them know when you can be available. And that has worked really, really well for me. And then I always make sure to confirm my details in writing. A lot of times things are moving so fast that you don't think about rate or other expenses until after, but then you can run into a lot of problems that way. So I try to be really firm on just knowing what the rate is, what's covered, what's not, what I may have to spend out of pocket, if anything. And if I do have to spend things out of pocket, is it something where I'll get the money back, on the back end when I can invoice, or is that just a cost that I'm going to have to take on as a part of this story and then, write it off on my taxes as a business expense. And then for me, follow-up is key. Anytime I'm pitching, I usually have 2 to 3 outlets in mind at once that I'm going to pitch. I'll give a 2-day follow-up, depending on the story. If it's really urgent, of course, I'll adjust that, but follow-up is key. But I always give myself a deadline. If I'm not hearing back from X editor by a certain date, then I need to move on to the next place so that I can make sure that my story gets placed and that I don't miss the opportunity to get it out there. And then for some stories that I know are going to be ongoing, I might just tweak the pitch a little bit because I may not get that day of or day after, but I could get that, hey, where are things now? A week after, because I do a lot of feature stuff. So that has helped. That has worked for me in that regard. When it comes to negotiating contracts, this was the biggest thing for me, which was learning how to read them. The understanding all the terms in them, making sure the rate there was clear, the currency and payment, because I'm working between different countries. I know, sometimes there would be conversion fees or expenses that were passed on to me that took away from already small payments in some cases. If there were any late fees that would be paid to me if I was paid after the date that was set. If kill fees are available, if the story is commissioned and then they decide to not run it, do I get a portion of that money I was supposed to get for the completed story back? I want to know that up front. And then the time frame. One of the biggest things as a freelancer for me has been the time frame in which payment is received. A lot of times magazine outlets, they have between 30 to 45 days is typically the time frame in which they pay you, and 30 to 45 days after publication. So if I was working on a story in February and I turned it in February 15th, but it doesn't publish until March, I know that I'm not going to get, I can't expect payment until up to 45 days after March 15th. So I personally don't do a lot of magazine work unless I know that the rate is going to be something that makes sense. Because you put a lot of time and effort, but you don't necessarily get to see the return in terms of payment right away. So I usually space those things out for when I want to do a major feature. I know it's going to typically, you'll get paid per word. and paid well. So then it will make sense. And I'm like, okay, I have other quick turnaround pieces that I can count on that will make up the difference. I always want to make sure that in my contracts, if other expenses are incurred, how does the company handle that? Will they reimburse me? Can I put in a report? Can I include that in my invoice or not? And then there are a lot of clauses in there, the non-compete clauses that sometimes won't allow you to work for other outlets while you're freelancing for a particular publication. And that's something that that's a clause that I like to strike out in any contract, because I'm a freelancer. I need to be able to work for other places as long as it's I'm not, pitching you the same story, or we're not, they're completely different things. So I want to make sure that that's not in there. Copyright clauses, so that you do maintain ownership of your work, or at least, in depending on what it is, the right to republish and like put on your websites, put up on your social media, that kind of thing. Because some contracts, I've learned, trial and error, can be very restrictive. Again, payment timeframes, I cannot stress that enough, because I've had so many situations where I'm supposed to get paid within 30 days, and 3 months later, you're still trying to figure out what happened to my payment. And then consulting a lawyer if needed. I do work with an entertainment attorney that works with a lot of journalists and media companies. And so for my typical my typical freelance contracts, I've learned to read them. And so I don't necessarily need that anymore. But when I'm signing larger contracts, I do go to my lawyer to read over, let me know where to strike out, where language changes should occur, and how to kind of work through that, so that I am looking out for my best interest, as well as just making sure that I'm able to get the best out of the contract, as well as, get the work done. So that is always a really big thing for me. And then finances. Finances as a freelancer, there are so many things that I wish that I knew that I didn't. And the biggest thing had to do with, I was always organized with tracking my expenses, but tracking those out of pocket expenses, because they do add up, and working with an accountant. My accountant has really, really helped me to understand the many deductions that I can take, my phone bill, travel when I'm in the Caribbean, the daily rate that you can calculate by the State Department when it comes to food and accommodation allowances that you can deduct for tax purposes, the trainings that I have to pay for out of pocket because I'm not staff, my professional membership. So let's say like Society of Professional Journalists, National Association of Black Journalists, conferences, all those things that, I thought about before, but didn't necessarily know that I could deduct. And then other things that I may have to do for a story, whether it's just getting there, right, as well. So that was really, really big for me. And working with an accountant has really made me work smarter and not harder. I have my, every week I know to take a look at what I spent, who I need to invoice, and I use like an automated billing system now, so it can send out my invoices. It keeps track of my what do you call these? My contracts, and kind of just lets me know, hey, reminder, do you want to follow up on this invoice today? That kind of thing. So it has helped me streamline, and streamlining the process has been really big for me. As a freelancer, one of the biggest helps for me has been seeking funding through fellowships, one-time grants, or I have my own LLC now. So I am a business owner, a small business owner. And I did that, one, from the standpoint of just being more organized and as a business person, or as an entrepreneur, a media entrepreneur, but then two, because you qualify for funding outside of fellowships and grants, you qualify for business funding as well. And that was really important for me as I'm scaling, things out, that I had access to business funding as well. But when it comes to fellowships, anytime I'm really seeking to do a long-term, in-depth project, I seek out fellowships. I was an ICFJ International Reporting Fellow, the Bringing Home the World Fellowship. I was also a Pulitzer Center fellow as well, a grantee of the Pulitzer Center, and the University of Southern California, their Center for Health Reporting. I was a fellow for that program as well. And these fellowships really helped me to do some of the in-depth, months-long reporting that I just know out of pocket just was not feasible and not doable for me. But with a $5,000 or $10,000 grant or different ones combined, I was able to get the funding support to get it done. I do keep separate checking accounts and credit card accounts just for my business expenses only, so that when I'm going to do taxes or when I need to look at what's coming in, what's going out, how much I'm making or not, where I may need to cut back on, everything is in one place. I do, as I mentioned, use a time and billing program to save time. Sometimes I was utilizing QuickBooks for quite a while, and I recently started using another platform called Honeybook. And I like that as well because it helps me it doesn't just keep track of billing, but it helps me to schedule appointments and follow-ups and things like that. And then also putting aside, working with my accountant to save for taxes. Sometimes I do pay quarterly. I pay, my taxes quarterly. And then other times I, just know to put aside in my savings account. And then at the end, by the time it's tax time, I know I might owe, taxes, and I have the money there one time to pay it. And then the last slide is just always improving and evolving. I take advantage of workshops and short courses to level up my skills continuously because I know that things are always changing. So I do that. The past year, especially with COVID, a lot of the things that I would have had to pay for were actually promoted and given free. So whether that was safety trainings or editing or things like that. So I did a lot of that. Continuously updating website and social media profiles with your niche. Like, people know that I am if you want stories on the Caribbean region and diaspora, I'm your person, because I literally shout that from the rooftops. It's race, culture, Caribbean, race, culture, Caribbean. You know that you can come to me for that. So I get a lot of response through that. Maintaining the social media presence and promoting your work, even though I know it could be annoying sometimes, but doing that often. And then knowing when it's time to scale back, pivot, or expand. If last year taught me nothing else, it was that I really have to know when to pivot and how to do it and utilize the other skills that I have. I was not getting a lot of reporting work last year this time due to COVID. Contracts were canceled left and right. So what I did was lean into those other skills: journalism trainings and education, working with students virtually, hosting events virtually, doing script production and event production on the back end because I have that production background, and just having to make it work for myself in a different way, and then knowing when to expand. So I am now signed to an agency who now takes care of a lot of the follow-up emails and pitching me to different places or booking me for speaking engagements, that kind of thing. But it's taken me several years to get there. So depending on where you may be in your freelance career, I'm thinking about, is it time for agency representation, legal representation? Is it time to hire help to get, someone to work with you? Or is it time to scale back just a little bit until you get to a particular place or make a particular mark in the freelance scheme of things, and then move forward? So that's just me kind of talking about things that have worked for me, and that's it as far as my presentation. And I would love to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, but I'd love to kind of get your feedback and any questions you have for me.
Thanks, Melissa. And talking about questions, you have lots of questions already. And
Okay,
I think we'll just have these conversations based on the questions that have been coming. So let's start with the question from Joanna Absalom. So Joanna is asking if you can share tips on how you expand your network with sources and industry players, and how do you maximize these networks?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've done a couple of things, and because what I do in covering like Caribbean stories is very niche, I seek out a lot of the groups that are doing the work that I look to cover. So I do a lot of reporting on mental health impact and climate change impact in the region. So there are a lot of organizations that I know of that do the work in those spaces. So I typically reach out to just do like a 15-minute conversation sometimes, just to kind of get to know who are the players, right? Who are the people that are doing the work in these spaces? What are their current concerns right now? What are they looking to? What are some of the things that they are working on? Because every time I've been able to do that, it has helped me to build a bit of a rapport with some potential sources. Some don't work out, and then in other ways, just kind of knowing like what the issues are. So when something is coming up, then I can either go back to that person or they can point me in the right direction of someone. As far as my network of reporters, I one of the biggest things that has helped me is being a member of organizations like National Association of Black Journalists or Society of Professional Journalists or some of the international reporting groups. I try to be as active as I can in those groups because that's where my colleagues have come in and helped me to get sources in other places that I may not have been able to get myself, or help me to kind of push and further those. And I know like I'm not good at it all the time. I'll be very blunt in telling you that sometimes I'm really active, other times I'm just trying to, get through the day. So I'm not always on top of it. But I do my best with that because those networks are priceless. They have the not only the people resources, but then they put you in touch as you kind of move along. So that has been really helpful for me.
Yeah, thank you. Miriam would like to know, how do you find freelance gigs, especially those outside journalism? Are there freelance job boards or websites that you would recommend?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I do use, and I meant to put them on these slides. I'm so sorry about that, but I'll make sure you get them. So I do it. There are a couple of Twitter lists and freelance sites. I'm just going to pull up something really quickly because I definitely meant to include that and I totally forgot. But there are a couple of those things that I use, and I just want to pull them up so I don't forget to mention these few that I personally use on a regular basis.
Okay.
And
While you do that,
mhm,
let me be also encouraging every member, every person on this call. If you have any question, any burning question you have regarding your freelance journalism journey, please endeavor to put it
mhm.
in the chat Q&A button if you are joining us on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, please use the comment section under this live stream video. Please use that, and Melissa will definitely get those questions answered. And are you ready for are you
Yes,
ready,
I am.
Melissa? Okay, you
Yes,
can
I'm
take it from
ready.
there.
So a couple of examples, I use sites like studyhall.com. There's another really popular newsletter called Inside the Newsroom that gives you not only kind of like what are top stories trending around the globe every week, but it gives you information on jobs, freelance roles, fellowships, that kind of thing. There's also Writers of Color on Twitter. They have a website, but Twitter is like the main way that people use it. And so editors literally will put up, hey, I saw one for National Geographic, for instance, the other day, and the editor is looking for pitches for Juneteenth, and it's for the travel section of National Geographic. She puts out what she's looking for and what the rate is, and then their email, and you can pitch them. So Writers of Color is a great resource because the editors will just put what they're looking for. It could be freelance roles, it could be full-time positions, fellowships. Another great one, there's a group called Diverse Social Media Editors and Digital Journalists, and that's a group on Facebook as well. So there are a lot of different online groups that I utilize regularly, and I encourage people to utilize, because not only do you get the information about what are potential freelance roles, but then they are very forthcoming most times about what do these places pay, right?
Yeah,
Because one of the biggest things for me is, you want to write for an outlet, and you want that byline, or there's this great outlet, but sometimes the pay sucks. Like it really does. So going into it knowing like, okay, am I going into this for the byline? I really want this byline for a particular outlet, even though the pay is like $200 and it's going to help me. Or am I somewhere in my career? You know, I've been a journalist for 10 years now. I'm established to a point where I'm just like, that's just not feasible for me anymore.
Yeah.
So then I need to, this is my base rate, right? So I'm not gonna, if the outlet is paying under what my base rate is, then I'm gonna look for somewhere that's paying 500 plus, or a longer form piece that might pay $1,000, something like that. So it's give and take, but these online groups have really helped me to like know. And sometimes in these groups, people have been really generous to create just full list, a running list of outlets, what the story was, what the word count was, when they got paid,
Okay.
what the experience was like.
I like to come in at that point because we have to be very careful, Melissa, because we have different journalists that they are at different stages of their freelance journalism career. For some people, getting a $200 opportunity, it's exciting. While for some people, it's actually not enough for what they think they can do. And social media personally has also been a very, very effective tool in actually getting gigs. I've always advised freelance journalists, you cannot say you are writing on science or health and you are not following editors of the top health platforms that you desire to write for. Because anytime they have anything, they are looking out for, there is a call for applications, they will always put it out there. I can't even count the number of commissions I've gotten via Twitter. An editor will just say that I need this pitch before the end of the week, who is available? And immediately you see those kind of tweets, please latch on it. So let me go to another question, because like I said,
yeah,
I don't
lots
know
of
how we are going to
questions.
finish all these questions.
But
The next question.
I
Okay.
just wanted to point out,
Can you finish?
I just wanted to point out that I did say, depending on where you are in your career, right? So the $200 may be something that makes sense for you, and you want that byline, that makes sense. But if you're at a certain place in your career, because I know we have people of, different levels on the platform today, then it may not make sense. So it's just kind of give or take for what makes sense for you. However, the online groups have been really helpful in just gauging what might you be able to expect from a particular outlet, so that you go in knowing that, hey, I'm going to get this byline, this makes sense, this works for me, or maybe it doesn't. So I know we have some other questions as well. You can go ahead with the next question, Paul, if that's okay. Maybe we lost Paul for a second. Let's see if I can see some of the questions in here. I'm going to pull them up. I do believe that my presentation is going to be available after the live session, that it will be available. I believe it's on ICFJ's YouTube page. So yes, that will be available. And I will also make sure that some of the websites that I did not include in the presentation will also be included. And let me see. Paul, are you there? Okay, so maybe. Okay, I'm trying to just get through the questions right now. Sorry about that. I'm not seeing them from where I am. Let's see. I see a question. Do editors commission more stories with freelancers they know? How do you connect with editors in the digital age? Well, there are a number of ways to do it. I don't think there's any one size fits all where that is concerned, but definitely taking advantage of Twitter and Facebook when the editors do put the call outs on these places is how I've connected with a lot of editors that I didn't know personally, but that I wanted to connect with, or it was a publication I wanted to write for. So I do follow those specifically, and I follow those editors because they'll often literally put it out in a tweet. They may put it out, they typically put it out in tweets, or they'll sometimes Facebook, but I see it more so on Twitter. And I connect by sending that initial pitch to them. And even if that particular pitch isn't necessarily accepted, then I follow up with something else. And then also when there are instances where they are providing Q&A sessions or things like that, then I use it as an opportunity to kind of follow up with them to pitch. And I don't know if they are commissioning more stories from freelancers that they do know, but I do try to utilize Twitter and Facebook a lot to see the call outs.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for answering so many questions already. And one question that I think I'd like to ask you, outside what you've answered so far, is what do you think should be the priority? And for a freelancer that is approaching a news outlet for the first time, and because for some people, it's all about the money. How much are you willing to pay for this particular story? So from your experience dealing with media houses, what do you think should be the priority when a freelancer is reaching out to an editor, especially for the first time?
Yeah, I think you have to prioritize whether or not this is a story that makes sense for the publication at that time, right? Especially for people that don't necessarily do breaking news, right? I came from a breaking news background, and now I haven't, now I'm doing feature reporting. So I have to know if it's something that is going to make sense. And I am able to understand that by just taking a look at their regular coverage. And that's just me kind of skimming the headlines, seeing what they're covering regularly, and seeing if it's a story that would either be a great follow-up to something already done, or a story that can add to the kind of work that that outlet may be seeking to do. And I'm able to pitch something that I think would get that yes. So I think prioritizing if this is something that makes sense for the outlet, one, and then is there a way for you to then get a follow-up story out of that? So it's not just a one-time story for that outlet and it's over. Is there something you can turn into a follow-up piece as well? And I try to prioritize that so that I can, in that way, build a relationship there.
Yeah, now Ms. Smith is asking a very important question, which is freelance journalism and social media. Let me give you a quick background. Sometimes you will see scenarios that a journalist will be angry that a story he or she pitched to a media platform was not commissioned, but was now assigned to another writer. And the person will now take to social media and start insulting the editor and the media platform. So what do you think social media approach for freelance journalists should be?
Well, I would say one of the biggest things is, having worked from a staff role and now being a freelancer, is understanding that even though you may have pitched the story and you see it done by someone else, that could have been a story that was already assigned to someone, or a similar idea was already in the works. And, maybe they didn't get back to you because they already had someone that they were going to have do it. Like, there's no way to know 100%. So when it comes to social media, as upsetting as that can be, I think you can move on to another outlet, because what you don't want to do is burn your bridges before you even create them. I think it's okay to, if there's something blatantly done wrong. There were a couple of times where, you saw campaigns against some media outlets for not paying their freelancers for months and months at a time. And you saw journalists kind of rally together to say, hey, you need to step up to the plate and pay people. That I get and I understand. But if you pitch something and either it's not accepted or the idea is gone to somewhere else, I think, you can follow up with that editor. If it's like a blatant thing, like, hey, this was my idea, and that this was, something that maybe not only you can get, because ideas are out there. And but I think it's important to remember that they have staffers, or they might have a consistent team of freelancers that may have been working on it. And it's okay to try and address it with an editor, but social media may not be the place to do so. I think you have to kind of weigh if it's even worth that for you. But then there are some times where you see certain campaigns for media companies when they just get it wrong, and when they just get it dead wrong sometimes. I think it's important to say something.
Yeah, we have a very good question from a journalist in India, who's saying that freelance journalism is at 0 point, and everyone needs the ID of a journalistic organization. And so the person is asking, how can we practice freelance journalism in an environment that still looks at journalism in the context of a journalist representing a single organization? And to also paraphrase the question, how do you go about dealing with identification issues, especially if you are just freelancing for an organization that is not willing to just give you that ID?
Right. Yeah. And I've run into that on a couple of occasions. And so it depends on the outlet. Sometimes I've had to ask a supervisor or a producer to say, hey, I'm going to be, when I'm here in the States, it's one thing because, I know the public space laws, those kinds of things. I'm reporting fine. But when a lot of times when I'm abroad, it's asking for that editor or producer to provide me with something that states that I'm working for that outlet. Sometimes it's just like, sometimes they'll give me a temporary badge. Other times it's nothing. And so I know what some journalists have done from an international perspective is joining some of the international journalist reporting groups, and they'll provide you with, with your membership, you get an ID that says, you're a journalist, you work internationally. Some might put other information on there, but like the International Freelance Registry, that group, they provide journalists all over the world with IDs. So because they understand that not everyone belongs to a media house, so you're not going to be able to get that. But it really varies outlet to outlet. So there's not any one answer to that. But then to the other part of your question, in a reporting in a country where journalists are seen as working for one outlet, I think it's something that is just going to change with time. I don't necessarily have a straightforward answer to that. But as we are seeing things change before our eyes, both in the industry and with how we do things, I think that change is coming now. So maybe like before I was a freelancer, there were places that I was able to get into simply because I had it was like the New York City press clearance. And then when I became a freelancer, I had a hard time doing it. But then as people started to see me kind of coming back and back again, that became easier. Or you're like, I'm a freelance reporter working for X outlet and I haven't had an issue. But it's really been give or take, to be honest, in my experience.
So Kimberly Brown, like I said, lots of questions, and I want to take as much as we can. Kimberly Brown is asking, how do you deal with overwhelm? Kimberly said, I've been freelancing for 5 years and I find I get overwhelmed with the amount and variety of stories to pitch and cover. So while you have to balance so much, how do you not get overwhelmed and paralyzed?
Oh my gosh. Well, I can tell you, sometimes I do a great job and other times I don't. Like I really fall off and I have to just kind of regroup. So for instance, last month, what took place was the volcanic eruptions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, I've covered St. Vincent and the Grenadines for about 4 years now, and I've spent a considerable amount of time there. When the volcanic eruption happened, I was actually in Guyana with my family, and here I was thinking, okay, I have, I'm just trying to be with my family, and nothing's going to happen. I'll be able to have this trip and get back home. But being that this was a country that I know well and there was so much news around it, I kind of jumped into gear right away and started to work on stories. And I realized I had already pitched other stories for completely other things that I had to say to editors, hey, because of what's taking place in St. Vincent right now, I'm going to have to turn my attention to that. Can we revisit this story at a later date? Or I don't, and be honest in saying that I don't think I'll have the bandwidth to work on all. And I've gotten better at that, because I used to not want to I'm like, oh gosh, like I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to let anyone down. But I had to be realistic in knowing that I was covering volcanic eruptions that were going to take me into several weeks, in which it did. And I had to focus on that, because I ended up working for 3 different outlets, but covering that same topic versus trying to cover that, cover something, with politics in the US, cover the White House, do all those things. It would have been just too much. But learning that, hey, if I just focus on the one topic that I'm reporting on, but doing different stories across the board, then it works. And then outside of that is setting boundaries. I've been really bad at that sometimes, especially working from home in this past year, but knowing that when it's time to just cut it off at whether it's 6 p.m., 7 p.m. for your day, just really have set some boundaries for yourself so that you're not literally working all day long. I'm still learning. I'm still getting better at that aspect, because, as a reporter, you're kind of like always on, always thinking, but setting some boundaries for yourself so that you're having a little bit more balance is really, really important, because I think it's easy to get wrapped up and to just kind of push yourself too much. So I'm getting there, just like you are.
Oh, yes. So I think I agree with this next question, because I also have, I'm also thinking in line with what this person is asking. I'm talking about Bule Ungweni, who is asking that when freelancing, what is the importance of registering yourself as a business, despite being a one-man or one-woman show?
Yeah, so that really comes down to funding, to be honest. I wouldn't be able to apply for certain business funding, whether that's business loans, or, as we saw in this pandemic, small business assistance, the PPP loans, those kinds of things. It makes you, it puts you in the position where you are able to take advantage of financial opportunities that are available to businesses. And that's really important, one. And then two, when it comes to the legal side of things, should you ever get into any legal, issues for something you write or something you work on, they would be able, and let's say you have to go to court, they would be going after the business and not you personally, right? So it wouldn't impact your personal assets, your personal income. It would be what the business assets are in income. So you keep those two things separate and can avoid, any potential issues. You hope that wouldn't happen, but it's really just a protection for yourself in that regard. So I thought it was a smart move for me for both reasons.
It was very smart, and I agree with you. So for journalists asking specific questions about individual tools, apps, and website that she mentioned, I think if you can just go to these particular individual tools, the help section will be really important, because she does not represent any of these tech tools. And so I also have there's another question that I think is important from Shalini Gupta, who is asking that, are there any online courses that you would recommend for print freelance journalists? Any that you have taken? Is there any that you have taken personally that you can actually recommend for them?
So the ones I have taken have been things that were done internally, like either through like my affiliations with different journalism organizations. So I can't speak to those, because those were done internally in the past. But what I can say is the Poynter Institute does a lot of great trainings, both for print and broadcast television journalists, as well as digital. They do a lot of great online training. So it could be anything from, it could be feature writing. It can be making your writing sharper on deadline. I know I did a TV one last year about, doing investigative reporting on deadline, quick turnaround kind of thing, and making your stand-ups and things more, making them better. So some of them, can run a couple of $100s, but in the past year, I think that that 8-week session, 1 hour a week or an hour and a half a week, I think it was $50. They made it. And other times they give them for free. So I always take advantage of things from the Poynter Institute, and that's Poynter Institute. They really, really give great sessions, and Society of Professional Journalists does as well. I know our inboxes are flooded, but I put those, I kind of mark those things that come in from those outlets, because they do provide you with a lot of either free or low cost training opportunities, and they've helped me a great deal. Oh, and then
Yeah, so I'm
conferences
putting two
too.
different
Yes.
questions.
Okay. And then
Oh yeah,
conferences. Yes, the
conferences are
conferences.
very, yeah, conferences are very, very helpful because you have hands-on teaching now. So I'm putting two different questions together. One
Okay.
from Miriam. Miriam is asking, and they are all around pitching. So the first question is this, what should a pitch include? What are the specific details I think a pitch should include? And how do you protect your pitch ownership? Then there's another question on regarding looking at COVID-19 pandemic situation. How do you keep disciplined when transitioning into freelancing, especially when working from home, since some open workspaces or cafes are not safe in the pandemic? You know, when you are a full-time journalist with a media house, you're expected to go to the office, so you have your workspace. That creates a sense of discipline. But when you are a freelancer working from home, how do you ensure discipline?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last question first, and it's separating your workspace, right? It was very easy for me to, if I'm, you're sitting on your bed with your laptop and you're trying to write a story. Literally, it did not work. Like, I would fall asleep so much, or I'd want to do other things. So I carved out and made sure that I created a separate workspace. Um, like a small desk, or working at a table, or just working in a room, if you can, that's not near where you sleep, has made it a huge difference for me. I set alarms for myself throughout the day, so I know, hey, I need to wrap this story within an hour and a half, 2 hours. I need to get this in. I set alarms throughout the day, not only to get work done, but to keep moving, because sometimes you can really be sitting at your computer. 5 hours have passed and you haven't gotten up, you haven't eaten anything. And so you have to not only be disciplined in your work, but be disciplined in your self-care. I think that's really, really important and easy to kind of not think about when you're just trying to get the work done. So I sit down and I set those alarms to remind myself to get up, get something to eat, just listen to music, whatever it is, and then keeping my workspaces separate. And then to the first question, can you remind me of what that was again?
Pitching, what are the specific components
Yeah.
a pitch should contain, and how do you protect your pitch ownership?
Yeah, so pitching is a mixed bag, but what I have gotten and through the editors that I've worked with is you want to keep it short, right? 200 to 250 words maximum. And you want to give me, your who, what, when, where, why, and how in those 250 words. And then why you're the person to do it, right? After I give my 200-word pitch, I always I'll put a line so they know that's the end of the pitch. And then I'll put 2 lines about myself. So I'm pitching this Caribbean piece. I've been a Caribbean correspondent for 6 years, covering, mental health, climate change, and culture for X, Y, and Z outlet. Or I have a background in tech and business, and now I can wire the person for that story, and I'm able to report on this because of X, Y, and Z. But I don't think there's any sure-proof way to protect the pitch. But what I say is I don't include specific names of people in my pitches most times. I'll more so give you the scenario. I'll give you the pitch, and then I say I can interview or provide, or these are the interviews I can set up, with a person who was impacted by this, a person who lost their home, or the expert. I can get an expert in this field, right? I may already have the person, but just so I'm not necessarily giving information for you to go and then call that person, I'll just say expert in this field. I can secure these 3 people, and I always like to say I can secure people to speak on X, Y, and Z, so that I've already thought that through. and then I give you my, why I'm the person for this piece, and I move on. Some places require you to also add a photo plan. So like, let's say, I know National Geographic does that. After your pitch, they want to know, well, what's the plan for your photos? What are we going to see in this piece? And are you going to be working with the photographer? Are you going to be doing the photos yourself? And then if you are, then you have to attach, your portfolio, because, they want to make sure it's at a certain quality. So though that would be my advice for pitching. And I always follow what the pitch guidelines may be, if some are available, just to tailor it to what they want.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So another question from Hamia Paleja is, do editors commission more stories with freelancers they know? And how do you connect with editors? So I think you should also use this question to cover, to give advice on how freelance journalists can relate and interact with editors, whether there are some do's or don'ts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is one of the questions that I pulled earlier, but I think it's great to go back to, because I think there's two things that are important here. And one is making sure that because we're in the digital age, is to utilize that to your advantage. Editors are more accessible than ever. Like, you're not just looking in a magazine for like who's on the masthead. They're on Twitter. Every editor that I have worked with or want to work with, I follow on Twitter. I keep up. There are certain ones where I might turn on notifications, because I want to know, they may be putting out a commission, or they put out commissions once a month. So I might turn it on for a little while and then turn it off. So I do that a lot, and I take advantage of the fact that they're more accessible in that way. I might respond to something that they're posting about, or I utilize that to keep my running list of contact information. Like, I'm always updating my contact list. So maybe even if I'm not ready to pitch that editor now, I have their email. I know the kinds of stories that they're looking for. And then when I am ready to information, and I also know kind of like how they're thinking, because they're telling me online. In addition, I think it's really important to utilize your network of journalists, because they do help, and do give advice on, if I might reach out to a colleague and say, hey, I saw or I saw that you did a recent piece in X magazine or outlet. Do you mind sharing that contact information? Or if you have a relationship with them, do you mind doing an email intro, or are they accepting pitches at this time? I do that all the time. I just want to know, because sometimes a particular outlet may not be accepting pitches for whatever reason, but kind of utilizing that network to do it is really helpful. And I think editors do have a team of freelancers that they work with regularly. So I'm on some of those teams, right, where they have their go-to, let's say 3 or 4 people, but they always need other stories. And that's where you can come in and pitch. That first pitch might be to someone has already got working on that story, but then they may have something else. So I would just encourage you to, if you don't get the first yes, come back around with something else, because that's how I've been able to really develop. And in thinking, okay, I'm not just pitching this for a one-off, I can actually do a follow-up piece or something adjacent to it. That's how I'm able to start building, and 2 pieces in, you start to develop a relationship and can keep it going.
Yeah, so lots of questions. Another question I want you to tackle is from Rosaline Nzioka. The question is there a formula for successfully applying for fellowships and grants? The person said that Melissa seems to have found a formula, and I've applied for several, and all I get regret. So what do you think should be important when applying for fellowships?
Oh my gosh. I like to always say, there is no one formula. What has worked for me may not work for someone else, or someone else may have it down better than I do. But when it comes to fellowships, one of the most important things I have always done is talk to the people who've done them already. I have not been afraid to ask people, You know, a lot of times they'll hold there might be like a webinar with former fellows or something like that. Or I might reach out and say, is there any former fellow that you think would be willing to talk to me? Because getting the insight on what to expect, what your application should include or not include, you know, what you want to get to the heart of and what they're looking for is really, really great and valuable. And then just following up. So when I first applied for a Pulitzer Center grant, I didn't get it. And what I did was I followed up with the editor. I kept in
Yeah.
touch. You know, I asked questions about what would have made this pitch better, or
Mhm.
what is it that I need to exemplify so that, you know, like I'm ready to go and get on this. And I got that feedback, and I took that feedback and I came back, I think 3 or 4 months later, and I was able to get that. But I think the biggest thing that has helped me is talking to the people who've done it, or just try to develop those relationships with the editors, and then applying for multiple. So the reason why I've gotten all of those is because I've applied for so many. And I think I've gotten the applications down to a science, and like, okay, this is your standard application. This is what you need to include. You want to always make sure you have a budget ready to go, you know, so you're always thinking about those things. So you know to anticipate certain things in the application. And then when you work on the pitch itself, you can always tweak that to what an editor or former fellows can give you as far as advice.
Yeah, Melissa, so another question, lots of questions again. How long do you wait before you send a pitch to another outlet?
Oh yeah, this varies depending on the timeliness of your piece, right? If it's more feature-like, then you definitely have a little bit more time to play around with. And so something like that, I would give like 3 days. I'm like, okay, this is a feature. It's more so may not be evergreen, but for lack of a better word, it may be evergreen. You have some time. So I'm like, okay, I'll give this 3 days. If it's something more breaking and you know that you need to kind of get on it. If you don't hear back within a day, I'd say move on to the next outlet.
Mhm.
And if you secure it somewhere else, and you know that person comes back to you, you just say thank you so much. I've already, you know, confirmed with another outlet, but I really want to keep in touch and pitch you the next. It really varies, and it'll depend on what the timeliness is of your story for sure. But I always say, if you're pitching one outlet, have two others in mind as your backups if an editor doesn't get back to you.
Yeah, this is also an important question. As a freelance writer, how do you navigate work if you get sick?
Oh yeah, it's tough because I think communication is key, right? Don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be looked at as not reliable. If something is wrong, you just need to communicate that. If something happens, you need to communicate that. Like I remember one time last year, it was because of COVID. I had a small surgery that I had said yes to a story. And then the next day the hospital calls and they're like, oh, you can come in to do the procedure because, you know, we're now, all our backlog is now fine because it wasn't anything emergency. But now I had to go and say, oh my gosh, I cannot do this story as I thought because I finally got in to do this procedure. And I just had to communicate that like upfront right away. And she said, oh, I understand. It's not a problem. You know, when you're fine, when everything's fine, I'd love for you to pick this up and do it after. And I did it, I think 2 weeks later. But I think the worst thing is just not communicating or feeling like if I don't say, or if I say something, I'm gonna, you know, look like I'm not reliable. But the communication is key across the board. I try to be very straightforward with my editors because people
Yeah,
understand things happen, and a lot of your editors too, when they're crunched for time, you will not hear from them most times. Like if they're really pressed, you're like, okay, I thought this should have been published. You may not see it. You may have to follow up 3, 4 times, and that's okay. So they get it too on the flip side.
now this question is a question popped in. I'm looking at another question, so it took my attention away from the question I was looking. Okay, but this is a question. Due to pandemic crisis, it has been very difficult for freelancers to get their work commissioned. So what do you suggest? Then another question I think you can take is back to back is from Peter is if there is nowhere that will publish a piece for payment, do you consider giving it to a publication pro bono just so that it gets published rather than not? Or do you never give your labor away for free like that? And should journalists take a different tack on this question depending on what stage of their career they're at?
I definitely think it depends on what stage you are in your career. I would say that you want to establish a relationship where you are getting paid for your work, but I definitely understand, depending on where you are in your career, that might not always be possible, and sometimes the getting the byline is, it kind of outweighs like getting the payment for that one time or for those series of stories. So I definitely understand that. But I think that if you did decide to go that route, it would be important to make it clear that, I could offer this story this time, for free, and then moving forward. But I think it's difficult to establish a working relationship where it comes across as, you know, where it comes across to them as, oh, well, they'll work for me for free, right? You don't want that to be like a standard. So I think it would be better to, when you look for commissions, if the commission is low, or they're just looking for people to write about it, but can't necessarily pay or have a big budget, then to do that so you can build up clips, or to work with journalism organizations where they're asking for you to work to write about different topics, be it where you're based. And even if those are, free, in that sense, you are doing it in the capacity where it's understood that that's not something you're going to do regularly, and you're not establishing this, pro bono relationship, because then it's hard to get out of that. Or if you accept a certain rate and you want to go above that, but you didn't like negotiate that, it's hard to move. Sometimes it's difficult to move above that. So I think it depends, but you want to, if you're gonna go the route where you just need to start getting clips out there, which I understand, try going through journalism organizations, that will either that are reputable platforms that can either pay you, can't, the byline is worth that, and then you can move forward. But then don't underestimate putting your stuff out yourself. That's why I mentioned, like, whether it's your own website, whether it's a medium platform or something like that, people do and are looking, sharing work, and then a lot of people's work has gotten picked up by even just putting it out on their own medium sites. And so it's really a give or take. And I would kind of need to know a little bit more about the personal, situation there. But I really think it
Okay.
depends. It's hard.
Even though we have lots of questions still, I think I'll just give you this last story. And apologies to those that their question may not be taken. So the first question is this: can you do the same story with different outlets as long as it is different angle and photos? That's the first question. The second question is from Michelle Ferguson. Michelle is asking, before you got stories published in some bigger publications, how did you go about talking about your experience and your bylines when selling yourself in your pitches? And the third question is important because I think it has a mental health angle that journalists do struggle with. So here is the story. After working for 13 years as full-time journalist, I lost my job and is not able to get a new platform for the last 5 months. Though I got freelance assignments, I'm not able to concentrate or to start working on my pitch. How do I convince myself and finish the story?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying. These are a lot of questions. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to. Okay, so I'll start with, can you do the same story with different outlets as long as it's a different angle and photos? And I would say that you can. I think that it's important, though, that you follow a couple of rules. Yes, different angles, different photos, and different sources, right? If you're in that story, of course, let's say statistics, of course, those will remain the same. But if you use John Smith in story A, use William Jones in story B. Like, you don't want to utilize the same people. So you want to, if you're going to be doing, like, for even my stories on St. Vincent, I know I was going to be reporting on this for 3 different outlets. things are ongoing. So I did more interviews than I would typically would do for a one-off story, because I knew I was going to be reporting on this for some time to come. And I needed people, I needed several people who are currently in shelters. I needed to talk to managers. I needed to talk to people from emergency management. I knew that I needed to talk to different groups that were helping and sending things down from New York City, as well as who was receiving it in St. Vincent. So I over interviewed so that I would be able to utilize different people in the stories, and then present different angles to the different outlets, and get something that would be tailored to them. So one was for a Caribbean diaspora outlet in New York. So of course, the focus there was, what is the community here doing to help people back home, and what does that look like? You know, we have Congress people here who are calling on the president, the Biden administration, to grant temporary protected status. So I turned the angle that way, and I only needed, you know, 2 people based, you know, in St. Vincent for that, and then everything else turned to New York. Whereas with another story, I needed more people. So I think that's definitely okay, but you just want to make sure you kind of over interview a little bit, so you have more, and you're giving outlets different things, so you're not giving them the same story. You had another question. I think it was the first question you posed, Paul. Can you tell me that one again? Because I want to take some time to focus on the last question.
Okay, so the other question is has to do with you mentioned the mental health, how to get over, how to convince yourself to write a story after being out of work for long.
Oh yes, no. That one I remembered. I thought there was another one that I wanted to answer that one last, but I thought there was another question before you mentioned the can you do the same story for
Yes,
different
I
outlets?
think, okay, the question is, before you got story published in bigger platforms, how did you go about talking about your experience and your bylines when selling yourself in your pitches?
Yeah, so I was a community reporter for some small like community papers in New York City. So I covered like the Caribbean community in New York City. I was producing stories. So I was producing stories on the assignment desk for ABC. So what I talked about was how I was able to take my community reporting, as well as my network experience, and marry stories, whether it be my local story in my neighborhood or that big international story. And even with community news, right? It was a national story that was localized to how it was impacting that, you know, that group in this country or in this community. So I was able to talk about it from that aspect, that no matter what it was, even if it wasn't a big outlet, I could do the job. And I could also show you where the connections were, no matter what the story was. If it was an international story, I could localize it. If it was a local story, what was the international spin or connection to the community there or here? And then also, why does it matter to people, or why should it matter to people no matter where they are? So I was able to talk about how I took those experiences and brought them together to do what I do now, right? As someone that, pre-COVID was spending and splitting my time between the Eastern Caribbean region and New York City. So I think it's just really showing what you did in the role versus, oh, it was just for XYZ outlet. I never look at it like that. I think my community reporting experience gave me some of the best experience of my career, because I had to do everything. And in those roles, I was able to show editors at an NBC or at a HuffPost that I knew how to get the job done, no matter what the story was. And now I could take that and do it on a bigger scale for a national or international outlet. So there was that. I hope that answered the question. And then
Oh,
for
yes.
and then for the last question, um, I totally understand where you are right now, and I really empathize with that. And I know how difficult it can be. It is very, very hard to concentrate sometimes when everything feels like it's closing in around you. What I have done is, to be very honest, sometimes I've had to step away from the reporting work for a little bit and utilize my skills elsewhere. So I talked about some journalism like adjacent stuff. because sometimes it just didn't feel fun anymore. It didn't feel good anymore. It wasn't helping me. It was actually, I felt like I had a mental block. I felt like I just could not get the pitches, the stories, those kinds of things together. And so in those instances, I might step away and not do any freelance work for a month, or just a couple of weeks where I am just, whether it's doing social media or it's hosting or just doing something else where I still feel, or just teaching. I work with a lot of high school students. Teaching them helps me to feel fulfilled because then I remember my why. Like, why did I do this in the first place? Why am I, doing this reporting on the Caribbean? Why did I pick this kind of journey? And in talking to my students and being able to teach them and them responding to me and the work that I've done, it helped me to guys kind of reaffirm the why. And then when I go back into my pitches, I feel like, okay, I'm ready and I can do this. I know that it's not something that's going to work for everybody, but I find that stepping away sometimes has helped me because you can get overwhelmed really fast. I think also because of COVID, don't be so hard on yourself. I think that what has happened to the industry due to the pandemic is just something that's unprecedented. Like every single contract I had in 2020 was canceled. Every single contract. I mean, I have 4 contracts lined up, all gone, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do at that point. But I had to understand that it would, as it always does, it comes back around. And I can honestly say now that things are starting to open up. Where 4 or 5 months ago, I wasn't seeing anything as far as full-time roles. I'm starting to see that again. So please, give yourself some grace and some time because we're dealing with something that nobody could have anticipated. So that's adding to the stress because I'm sure outside of everyone's job and work, you're dealing with family, you're trying to stay safe and healthy. And it takes a mental toll. And I think it's important to just be kind to yourself and know that you can take a little step back. And when you're ready to get back into it, it'll be fine. But just reminding yourself of that why through doing things that will make you feel good. For me, is working with my high school students. For you, it could be something totally different. And then get back into it to clear that fog that I felt like I was under for a while and you may be feeling. And I know that, again, I just want to say, I know it's not a one size fits all. And I know that's not necessarily, a fix, but I hope that at least it's helpful to know that, people understand. And because we've gone through so much as just a world, right? That it's okay to know that you're not alone and don't feel like you're doing something wrong or not doing something because you can't focus right now because it's hard.
Yeah. I was about to jump in, but looking at the comment section, you've really been able to inspire a lot of individuals, especially journalists from different parts of the world, who are dealing with one thing or another in their journalism career. And we are so glad that you can be their source of inspiration today. So really appreciate you, Melissa. And one last question, in 30 seconds, what do you think is going to be the future of freelance journalism?
Oh, wow. The future of freelance journalism, I think collaboration is going to be key. COVID-19 taught us that we need each other more than ever. And so collaborating with journalists across borders, it could be across your state, but across borders is going to be more important than ever. We need to lean in on each other. And the remote digital space of doing things, I think, is here to stay. But and we have to really work on tackling misinformation and doing our best to work together on it. So I think we're going to see more happen in the digital space, and the freelancing space, I think, is going to continue to evolve, and we have to be ready to, as we start getting back out there to see it unfold, and we'll have to keep safety in mind in a different capacity, because when I thought about safety before, it was like, staying safe in a war zone or staying safe in a natural disaster. But now with a pandemic, we have to include that as well, and how we get our job done and do it well.
So thank you very much, Melissa. You've been an amazing and insightful host. We really enjoy having you on this platform. And to every participant, we know we've run out of time today. And so I really hope this webinar has helped inform you as a journalist, especially whichever point in your career you are. If you're a veteran freelance journalist or you are just starting your journey, I hope you understand that you are not alone on this journey. There are different freelancers that are passing through exactly what you are doing. And we are here to support you, talking about resting on each other's shoulders. So I would like to introduce, if you're not a member of the ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum yet, I would encourage you to please find the group on Facebook. Or if you need more information about this initiative, please visit www.icfj.org. And if you'd like to access information, journalism resources on COVID-19, including mental health, your mental health as a journalist, please check out the International Journalists Network on www.ijnet.org. And please don't forget to fill out a survey that is coming to your inbox after this webinar, as ICFJ would love your feedback to improve programming for this series. I've seen a lot of recommendations, a lot of suggestions regarding what other topics you would like us to take. And it's obvious that this conversation around freelance journalism is unending. And we are also going to introduce to you more experts like Melissa, who are going to help you in improving your journey and your practice as a freelance journalist. So I'm really appreciative. I really want to take this time again to thank Melissa for being an incredible panelist today. And I hope everybody has a lovely day. So have a great day, everyone, and bye, everyone. Melissa, do you have the last word for
I just want to thank you so much for having me, for the ICFJ community for having me, and to just everyone for listening. I know how difficult, this career path that we have is, and I know I don't have all the answers, but I really hope that, at least some of my journey can be helpful and valuable to you. And I look forward to connecting and keeping in touch with people. So thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So Melissa's presentation would be, I will ensure to share it in the group. So if you're not a member of the group, please quickly join so I can have access to it. Have a lovely day, everyone. Bye.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.